No, yeah, I see it. It's not anything, major or anything like that. So I just wanted to hear your opinion about, it's very general, but what the current state of journalism. Like anything like you can contribute to the current state of journalism, like the pros and cons or anything, like, if it's better than what it used to be, in the past couple of years.
Sure. So 1 second. Okay. Journalism is always in flux, and it has been for decades and decades. This is a time of great opportunity in journalism, but also great worry in journalism. We're seeing newspapers in trouble. We're seeing television stations that are losing revenue. We're seeing magazines shutting down. And so it's very easy to feel upset about the state of media. However, there's also a chance, an opportunity to see so many new things happening, new projects, new ways of telling stories, new ways of connecting with people, new ways of having an impact as a journalist. We've seen people making money from just working in newsletters. We've seen people doing podcasts. We've seen people doing video shows. So on the whole, I'm optimistic, but I'm realistic. And what that means is that we have to appreciate the dire consequences for some of the problems that people have been having these last few years in terms of how news organizations have approached technology, approached ways of connecting with their audience, etc. But we know there is potential, and there are lots of new things coming up in the months and years ahead. So I remain optimistic, as I said, but realistic.
And based on the current state of journalism, like, what is your opinion or thoughts about the future state of global journalism in terms of like what is to come, and like what do you see in the future, like any type of new technology or any, anything, like if newspapers are going to get better, or like if they're going to transition to the online, the online articles or anything like that?
Well, certainly there's going to be a lot of change. And if I could predict, I would be a very rich man. So I don't like to predict too much, except to say that if you think about the last 10 years and the amount of change that has taken place in media, in audiences, in technology, that same amount of change is going to come ahead of us also, but in a shorter period of time. So things that took 10 years to happen could happen in 2.5 to 5 years. So we as journalists, as students of journalism, as people starting out in journalism, as veterans of journalism, we all need to work very hard to make sure that that future with all these changes are changes that we can absorb. We can not just survive in that period, but how do we thrive in that period? And that's something that we have not been good at in the past. And that's why we're sort of in the situation we're in. When the internet came around, we didn't know what to do. When the web came around, we didn't know what to do. When blogs came around, we didn't know what to do. When podcasts came around. And so the few people who understood all those tools, they did really well. Everybody else kind of was just sitting around. Some of them became roadkill, and that's terrible. So I want journalists, journalism students, veterans and beginners, everybody to be hyper aware of the changes that are happening, be good students of those changes, and then see where can we do well in this? Where can we absorb some of the changes? Where can we guide some of the changes? And therefore, what impact can we have from that?
Mm-hmm. So we've known that a lot of journalism is a global, is in a global aspect and stuff like that. So what are your thoughts about like international news flow, in terms of today, like not only in the United States, of course we're in the United States, so a lot of the news outlets like ABC and everything, of course they're international, but those are the ones that exist that I refer to in the US. So what is your thoughts about international news flow, like BBC, which is like more towards the London, England type of area, stuff like that, all those other type of medias?
I think that you are seeing lots of opportunity internationally for American publications and for international publications. You're also seeing lots of problems. The effort to spread misinformation, disinformation, either for political purposes or for medical purposes or for just to undermine democracy. You're seeing a lot of pressure being put on journalists around the world. But I believe that the same things, the same forces that happen here happen elsewhere. Sometimes they have it first, then we have it after, but we can learn from each other. And that's why there needs to be more connections, more opportunities for folks to study together, learn together, and be ready for the future together.
So relating to international news flow, like, I know you might have worked with a lot of like foreign correspondents or foreign, like, type of journalists. So what are your thoughts about foreign journalists in general? And also, like, a lot of news have been coming about the safety of these foreign correspondents. So like, what is your thoughts about that?
Well, I'll tell you, I've had hundreds of students go on to be war correspondents and foreign correspondents, and we always tell them to please be safe and put your safety first over the story. But many of those kinds of people have that thirst for stories and storytelling and danger, which can get them in trouble. But I think there's a heightened awareness among the people at headquarters that journalists need training. They need an understanding of where they're going. They need to be more aware of what their circumstances are and where they are. So I think the people are better prepared. And so I think that makes it part of the opportunity that we see ahead.
Thank you for that. And today in the current world, there's a lot of fake news spreading around. This concept is fake news, and people are trying to differentiate what's real and what's fake, and they're having trouble between them. So what is your opinion about fake news? And would you say that fake news has increased, the amount of fake news has increased over the years? And how do you see it, do you see it kind of decreasing over the next, couple of years, just because, maybe we're going to get more, we're going to be able to tell the difference more, or like in terms of like, I don't really know that in the question. Yeah.
I wish I could say that things are going to get better with fake news. Things are going to get worse, partly because there are people who are willing to absorb bad information and pass it on. Mm-hmm. And also the technology is going to get worse, right? Right now, a lot of the things are in text, in fake photos, Photoshop, things like that. Once you have the deep fakes available, once you have the technology that people can swap your face with anybody's on a phone, a lot of that exists already, then it's going to be much harder to tell what's real and what's not. And that's the point where all these foreign bad actors can jump in and benefit from that. So we need to be, not just journalists, but consumers need to be better about understanding the news and news literacy and paying attention to what's real and what's not. Part of the reason the pandemic has been going on for almost 2 years now is because of fake news, disinformation, misinformation. And we've seen everybody from football stars to podcast hosts to radio hosts who have lied, to Fox News people who've lied and extended this pandemic. And that pandemic, we also call it an infodemic of bad information, is killing people.
Okay. And, in the journalism world, there's a lot of, I think I can kind of safely say it's more, male dominated, as like, if there were people who were to interview for jobs, like what weathermen, for example, there's like a lot of weathermen in this that are like primarily dominated by male. So what is your opinion about women in journalism? And do you see an increase in women in journalism in the upcoming years? And essentially, like, what do you think they can contribute to journalism that men can't contribute to journalism?
Well, I've been seeing for a long time. So I was a professor at Columbia Journalism School for 20 years, and 70% of the class was female for the 20 years that I was there. So I worked and taught in an environment where there were more women journalists than men. It wasn't the reality in the news business, but that's slowly changing. We're also seeing some of the top leaders of major publications are now women, and that's a terrific thing. We have seen in politics, men screw up countries and governments and all of that. And we've seen women leaders do a better job in running some countries. So I believe it's the same thing with the news departments and newspapers and television shows, that you have women in charge, you're going to have a different perspective, you're going to have more empathy, you're going to have more attention to detail than with men. This is, of course, we're generalizing and somewhat exaggerating, but we need more women, we need more people of color in our newsrooms, we need them running things at the very top. It will make a difference both for readers and for journalism itself.
So the last final two things I want to ask you about is what is your take about self-censorship? So I recently started learning about this term in class recently, and a lot of things are being censored now on the internet and stuff like that. So essentially, a lot of the audience isn't getting like the true information. A lot of stuff's being hidden from them. So what is your opinion on self-censorship, and how do you see it going forward? Like, you think politically, you think the government might censor a lot of information to the public that that usually is supposed to get out to them, or from those type of aspects?
I think self-censorship is an interesting term because it captures many different things. It captures where you're so scared of the government, or you're so scared of the trolls that you don't post everything because you're worried about the blowback, right? You're worried about the blowback, so you self-censor. You are also unsure of whether you should be pushing on one particular topic because there will be somebody may call you from a government and tell you to stop doing it. Look, this has been part of how journalists interacted with the powerful for decades now. The whole idea is that we speak truth to power, we hold the powerful accountable, and they have the right to call you out on it. So one of the things that Steve Jobs used to do is call reporters who covered Apple and yell at them because he didn't like something they saw, or he didn't like something they wrote. And it doesn't mean that the journalists would immediately change what they did. Some of the things are already published. But the next time they're writing something and they choose a particular word over another word, maybe they'll go with a softer word because they don't want to get yelled at by Steve Jobs, right? I'm not saying they did that, but that's just human nature, right? We learned this in baseball and in tennis. Well, when people are yelling at the umpire or the referee, they're hoping that something will change on that particular incident or that call, but they're really they're fighting with those folks for the next call, right? So that you'll get the benefit of the doubt the next time. So you can imagine a referee who's like, it's a hometown game and everybody's yelling at him. Does he really want to do that? Maybe he let something slide that otherwise he would be like totally, locked down on what he would want to do. So that's where that self-censorship, self-regulation, those things come about. And it's a pity when that happens.
So in the global state of the world today, there's a lot of things surrounding climate change. So of course, climate change is something that we've been society's been dealing with for who knows how long, maybe decades or centuries, but it's been more recently in the 2000s about how we handle it. So this is very general, but what's your opinion about climate change? And in news articles, have you seen a majority of it, the websites dominated by climate change related articles? And how do you see journalism affecting climate change in the future? Maybe coming with solutions, writing solutions that the world might incorporate and maybe help solve it a little better.
Yeah, I know that apart from the pandemic and public health, the biggest thing that I worry about is climate change and the climate crisis, the climate emergency. The use of those terms tells you how much we have to worry about and where things are and where things could go and what we need to do. So I would say to you and to everybody who asks me about climate change and what we need to worry about, that journalists need to make it a priority. We have seen how badly journalists and government leaders at all levels, federal, municipal, state, regional, everybody screwed up handling the pandemic because they didn't know what to do. And it was a kind of slow rolling thing that killed 750,000 people, right? It was terrible. But what happens next time when the things happening aren't so obvious, right? There's not going to be a test. There's just going to be floods. There's just going to be fires. There's going to be just horrible things happening to all of us. And we're not ready. Journalism spends so much time. There's a famous saying about this from Fred Friendly, who was a legendary professor who taught at Columbia, where when I was there, I was at the very end of his tenure. And he said that journalism makes so much, television specifically, television makes so much money doing its worst, it has no incentive to do its best. Just think about that journalism has so much, makes so much money doing its worst. There's no reason for it to do any better. And that's what's going to happen. That unless things change, people are just going to ignore it until it's eating us alive. And then it's too late. It's almost like the aliens are telling us they're going to come and invade us in 15 years. You got to stop them now. You got to take things now. But you know how we are as Americans. We're just going to hang out and wait for them to come. Some of us are going to have signs say, take me with you. I love you, aliens. And we'll all be dead because we are just bad at handling disasters that are slow rolling and that are not visible in front of our eyes every single second.
Well, thank you. And I don't know if you recently seen an article, and it's about like I think in class we studied about, it was an article online about how a student was taking a picture of someone protesting, and then the journalist actually got blamed for that she, I think she took the picture, but she got blamed for taking the picture, although it was her duty to take the picture of the protester. So I just think that the state of journalism is very shaky in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very uncertain because a lot of people, of course, journalists have their own right to do certain things, but I feel like a lot of parts of society aren't agreeing with them. You know, like they feel like some rights should be taken away from journalists because of what they're supposed to do. It might be affecting a certain situation a lot harsher than it needs to be. But I appreciate your time today, and luckily I didn't go past your time. I again, I don't like to take up your day and stuff like that, but I really appreciate it. And before I had your class as a professor, I didn't really get to look about your background and stuff like that, but I realized that you have a lot of accolades and accomplishments in terms of I think, of course, you said you taught at Columbia for a long time, but you also created you're like a top 10, I think it's the Asian club thingy. I think you created in
Yeah,
terms of that.
yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
My mother's very
Yes.
happy about all of that. So thank you.
Yeah. It's really good. It's an honor to honestly interview you. I of course, as a professor, it's I look at you as a professor, but after the class, I see beyond and everything like that. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you and good
Thank you.
luck.
Yeah. So is the link gonna be? Are you gonna send the link to me, or is it just gonna